What's up guys, in today's video we are going to learn how to properly sand and restore the teak on your boat. So if you have a yacht, sport fisher, cruiser, or any boat with teak, this is going to be the video for you. Let's go. The teak on this boat is not in super bad shape, but it's not in great shape either. So the customer wanted us to come out and give it a sand and just restore it, and just to get the teak looking fresh again. And this is a common problem on most sport fishers. This boat is a 52-foot Viking. I have a lot of videos of this exact boat on my channel. In this case, we are using the Mirka sanding system with the 6-inch backing plate, and we're gonna go ahead and sand all of the teak flooring. I've actually already completed up here all of the flooring we're gonna go over in this video. I'm gonna go over exactly what sandpaper to use, what speed to use, things to look for when you're sanding teak, things to watch out for. If you are wanting to learn how to sand the teak on your boat, watch this video. At the end of this video, you're gonna be able to go out and sand any teak with confidence, because some of the questions that I personally had when I first started doing teak, I'm going to answer those questions in this video. Guys, like always, if you get any value out of this video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell notification, so every time I make a video it'll pop up. Also, all of the products that I use in this video are in the description down below. If you click those links to purchase those products, I appreciate you guys for that. Also, please share these videos. Sharing these videos help the channel grow, help support me and my e-commerce website, so any support in the sharing world would be great. Let's go ahead and check out the teak, and I'm gonna kind of go over some of the things that we're really wanting to look for when you're estimating teak. That's gonna be the first big key, learning what to look for when you're quoting. If you're a detailer and someone comes to you and says, hey, can you quote my teak? This is gonna be the stuff you're gonna look for. Also, if you are a boat owner or a captain, this is the stuff you're gonna wanna look for, so you determine what kind of sandpaper and time it's gonna take, and you're gonna learn how to sand teak with confidence. Here's our before and this is after. So this is what it's gonna look like now. This is not acid washed or anything like that, and you're gonna understand what all that terminology means. You could tell there is a significant difference just with sanding, but like I said, this isn't even completely done. We are gonna completely finish everything in this video. So first thing we're gonna notice is we wanna look for the peaks and valleys. Now, I know there's probably a more sophisticated term for that. What I mean by that is these heavy creases where you can almost stick your fingernail in them. You wanna determine how deep those are. If your teak is relatively smooth already, then you won't need to use super heavy grits. But in this case, the teak has so many peaks and valleys in it that we are going to use a super heavy grit sandpaper to get all of these out. That's the very first thing, is just see how thick these grooves are. Second is we want to see the caulk line. The caulk is literally lifted up in this case, all right? Now, it's like that throughout the entire boat. Most of the caulk is literally raised above the wood. If your teak is sanded properly, that caulk line is gonna be basically flush with the surface, okay? I can still feel it raised a little, but it's gonna be flush with the surface, and you can see how smooth that caulk line is versus this. You see how rugged and how lifted and uneven it is. We're gonna be sanding all of the caulk line down and the wood. This is the Mirka HEPA vacuum system machine. So the sander goes straight into this. So the sander plugs into here. And what's cool about this system is that it only turns on when you run the machine. So when you run the sander, it kicks on the vacuum. And when you're done with the sander, you put it down, the vacuum turns off, which is super great. This system is a little pricey, but if you do sanding or if you do teak a lot, go ahead and invest in the system. I promise you, you will not regret it. Now, you can use a regular dual action DA. The only problem with using a dual action DA is that you won't have the dust control. Part of this system is that this has holes in it. When you sand, it gets sucked right through the sander, right into the vacuum, so it cuts down on your dust a lot. Whereas if you're just using a Harbor Freight DA or the Griot's Garage, which you can use, you're gonna have a crazy amount of dust. That's kind of the only flip side. This is gonna help keep the dust down, whereas a DA is just gonna fling it everywhere. All right, guys, now that we have determined what to look for when quoting it or wanting to understand how much time this is gonna take, let's just go ahead and hop right into the tutorial. We're gonna do sanding. We're also gonna do an acid brightener wash. At the very end of the video, go over some tips on how to properly maintain it and how to keep it looking good for long-term maintenance plan when it comes to teak. Watch the whole thing. You're gonna get a ton of value on how to restore restore and sand your teak. Let's go. All right, guys, so we're gonna hop right into sanding, and right off the bat, I figured out what I started out doing was not aggressive enough. It took way too many sheets of sandpaper, and I wanted to leave this part in the video so you guys can see that you may not always get it perfect when you're quoting. I tried 40 grit on the sander, and I soon realized that I needed to hop to 40 grit on the rotary machine to really cut through this caulking. The caulking was just giving me a nightmare, and I'm gonna explain that here in just a second. All right, so I'm having to switch up kind of what I'm doing. It's taking a lot of time and I'm using a lot of sandpaper. So I'm going to use my rotary machine with 40 grit sandpaper. This is going to allow me to have more power to cut through that caulk, because right now with the sander, it's doing it, but I'm having to take a lot of time to do it and finish it, and it's just taking way too much time. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the rotary machine now and blow through it. I'm gonna basically have to go back over what I did, but it's gonna basically cut my time in half. Now you wanna be careful not to put on a lot of pressure, a lot of speed, because you are going to be removing a lot of product, but it's going to cut our time in half. It's just going to be more efficient. So let's go ahead and hop right to that. So we are going to sand with our rotary sander. Now this is pretty dry teak, so if your teak is already relatively smooth, you do not need to use this rotary sander. So I just want to make that clear. You do not need to use 40 grit on the rotary sander, but in this case the teak was super dry and we had to remove a lot of the caulking and a lot of the teak, so that is why we are using 40 grit on the rotary sander, and I have it on like 2 settings, which is going to be right at about 900 to 1000 RPMs. Now the rotary is going to make a mess, so get you a blower to just keep your work area clean. When you're doing the rotary, you want to make sure that you are getting most of the gray or that silver look out of it. As you can see here, it's really turning it that nice sanded wood look, and you can see that we're blowing through this caulking like crazy. The caulking was extremely high on this boat, so that's why we did have to use the 40 grit on the rotary. Now when you're done with the rotary step, it should look just about perfect, and the rest of the sanding steps are just going to be removing the scratches that the rotary put in. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're getting about 99% of that silver, that gray look out of the wood. That way when you do your rest of your sanding, it is literally just refining the wood and smoothing it out and just removing the sanding marks. Now when you are using a rotary machine, obviously be very careful when you're going around the edges next to the gel coat, because if you hit the gel coat with this machine and this heavy of a grit of sandpaper, you will blow right through it. Do your side to side, up down, side to side motion like you always see in a lot of my videos, but I like to really go with the grain as well, so go really smooth with the grain, and also go side to side to really smooth down that caulking. Okay, so we first did the 40 grit on the rotary machine. Now we're hopping to 60 grit on the sanding machine right here using the Mirka sander. When you're doing sanding, you never have to go over 80 grit. Okay, so either whatever you're sanding, always go down to about 40 to 36 grit. If you have to go that low, do 40, 60, and 80 grit, and that is it. If you go higher than 80 grit, like 120, 320, 400, 500 grit, then you can make the wood a little too slick and people will begin to fall and hurt themselves, and you don't want to do that. You want the wood to have a little bite to it. Always, even if your teak is in good shape, only do 60 and 80 grit. In this case, we did have to go down to 40, so we're doing 40, 60, and 80, and that is it. That is all the sanding that you have to do. On the Mirka sanding machine, it is really nice, so you can see all this dust here on the ground is going to get sucked right up through the machine, and it just makes for a really nice clean work area. We're going to finish up here with our 60 grit, and then we're going to move on to our 80 grit. As you can see, most of that gray is completely out. There is still a little bit here and there, but for the most part it is out, and we're just refining the wood at this point. All right, guys, we're gonna hop to our 80 grit. This is our last sanding step. We're gonna do the 80 grit. As you can see, when I'm getting around these edges, I'm just getting as close to that edge as I possibly can, and I kind of round it off onto the corner. But like I said, be really careful when you're running next to that gel coat, because if you hit that gel coat even at a split second, it is going to rip right through the gel coat. Also, I'm gonna note, if you see the little tabs where you pull up for the fish boxes, I'm gonna go over that in just a second, what I do to get around those. Obviously, just get as close as you possibly can without hitting them, because if you hit them with this heavy grit, it will scratch them up pretty intensely. So guys, when you're doing your sanding, you know, keep a decent pressure on there and just run side to side, up, down, side to side, kind of like you would if you're polishing a boat. But really just make sure you're looking at the grain. If you see any heavier swirls or scratches in the wood from the other steps, go ahead, you know, put a little extra pressure on that. And you really want to be watching at this step on the 80 grit, because this is the last step that we're going to be doing. You want to make sure that that 80 grit sandpaper is smoothing out all of the scratches and you're leaving the finish absolutely perfect. All right, so as you can see here, we're going to go around our little hatches. All I do is I unscrew them, lift them up, and then take the 80 grit and just get right around them, and that's it. I mean, it's literally perfect. You don't have to do a ton of perfect sanding under these because they're going to get covered up anyway. So just go ahead, undo all the latches with the screwdriver, lift them up, and just sand right around them. All right, guys, like I said, recap. You may not always have to go down the 40 grit, but do 40 grit, 60 grit, and 80 grit, and that is it. If your gel coat is in good shape, only do 60 and 80 grit sanding. We are officially done with the sanding. Let's go ahead and check it out. And this is what your teak should look like when you're finished sanding. If you see a bunch of gray areas and pits and stuff like that, you may need to do more sanding. Let's take a look at it, and it should look pretty much finished at this point. When we clean, it's gonna brighten everything up and clean it up, but for the most part, all your sanding, it should look pretty much perfect when you're finished sanding. So let's check it out. So like I said, this is finished sanding. As you can see, it is pretty much perfect and uniform. Now I will say, you will still see a little bit of gray in here. And like I said in the beginning of the video, you really don't want to remove all of them perfectly, because you would be removing really good wood. But for the most part, everything is pretty uniform. You know, you can still see a little bit of the gray here, and especially around your hinges, because you can't really always sand above them, so you just have to get it as good as you possibly can. And you can see some of those longer strokes, but for the most part, everything is nice and flush and even. That's the biggest thing you want to look for, is uniformity, making sure everything's flush and even. Alrighty, so now that we have everything sanded, now it's gonna be part B of this video, and that's going to be brightening it up and cleaning it and finishing it, okay? We made a mess with our rotary. We got stuff all over. So we're just gonna go ahead and give the cockpit just a decent wash down, and then we're gonna use Starke Teak Clean, okay? It's a two-part system. The first part's gonna really clean the wood, really get off any grime which may be left, which there shouldn't be because you sanded it, but then the second part is gonna brighten it up and really clean it. We're gonna do the A part, we're gonna do the B part, and I'm gonna go over everything right now in this tutorial. So first we're gonna wash everything, and then we're gonna go ahead and brighten up the teak with Teak Clean. Now after this, I'm gonna go over maintenance, care, and what to do in the future. So go ahead and hop right to it. First thing we're gonna do is just give the boat a nice little rinse down. I'm gonna come back the next day, which I don't have this on film, and I'm gonna wash the whole boat. But for right now, I'm just gonna kind of rinse down and get all that dust off. And then we're gonna do part A of Starke Teak Clean, okay? So I just, you know, kind of spread it out on the floor by hand, and then we're gonna brush it in. This is a super soft bristle brush. It's not a hard bristle brush, because you don't wanna really feather out the wood because you just sanded it all down. So just use a soft bristle brush. Go ahead, spread out the product really liberally on the floor. I used about 32 ounces on just the flooring here, and I just brush it in really good. You'll see it, it'll kind of make like a kind of a dark look to it, and that's just really showing you that it's actually cleaning deep into that wood. And then all you have to do once you've brushed in really good, just go ahead and rinse it off immediately. Alright guys, so part B here, same thing, just spread it liberally on the flooring. You'll kind of see it spot up. Go ahead and brush it immediately. Don't let it sit very long without brushing it in. You want to brush it in immediately. And this is the part B is going to really brighten it up. It's going to give it that fresh, sanded, beautiful blonde look whenever it's done. So you want the part B to really be brushed in very good. And then likewise, you just want to rinse it off as best as you possibly can afterwards. So once you rinse your part B off, you are completely done. I'm going to go over everything in just a second here, but I also want to address this. Do not put any oils on your teak, okay? I know that's a big popular thing. I personally hate oils because if you put oils on the teak, it's going to get everywhere. They stain really nasty. They'll stain the gel coat. If you do want a good waterproof sealant, go ahead and check out Simcoe sealant. That is a good sealant, but me personally, I just leave it completely naked and blonde. Alright guys, so after you do the Starke brightener, I usually let it sit for a day. Just let it air dry overnight. Like if you did it all day, just let it air dry overnight. You can see how great it's looking. Now it's not gonna be dark like that once it dries. It's gonna be more of a blonder color. But you can see overall how great that teak really looks now that it's nicely washed and prepped. Now I am going to come back tomorrow and wash the whole boat because we made a mess. You know, all the boat is nasty. I'm gonna rinse it off, but tomorrow I'm gonna come and just give the whole boat a nice wash from top to bottom, front to back, and then we will be finished up. All right guys, so let's check out the finished product. This is done. It's brightened, it's sand, it's cleaned, everything. And like I said, we're leaving this naked. We're not putting any sealants on there or any oils. I personally don't like oils, and I already explained why. But as you can see, everything is uniform. Sorry about that water dot. Everything is nice and uniform and clean. You can see we got that caulk perfectly flush with the surface now. Everything is perfectly smooth. Now you can see a little bit of gray, you know, still in some of those little cracks. But like I said, that is perfectly normal. And there's no need to pull off unnecessary wood. This wasn't in the video, but all of this was completed as well. So we did the top, the step, and all of the flooring. So let's go over some basic maintenance steps. First thing, just use a basic soap. So I don't really want to use wash and waxes on my teak. I want to use just a pure pH balanced soap. Starke makes a good one. It's called Pure Clean. That is a good one. There are plenty other just basic boat soaps. You can use the regular Orpine, not the Orpine wash and wax. So you don't want to use any waxes on your teak. Just basic pH balanced soap. Once it starts to get a little dirtier, you might get like fish blood or something on there. You could use a little bit of degreaser, like Super Clean would be good. And you can also keep it maintained about once every 4, 5, 6 months with the Starke Teak Clean. Okay, so redo the step 1 and the step 2 again. That is a good way to keep your teak looking fresh. Now, once you've cleaned it, once you've used your Starke Teak Clean a few times, about once every, you know, 1.5 to 2 year mark, go ahead and hit it with some 80 grit sandpaper and just re-sand it. Keep the peaks and valleys all level, keep everything nice and sanded. That is the best way to keep your teak fresh. A lot of people think like, hey, the more I sand it, the more I'm taking off. And that is relatively true, but one thing you have to realize is whenever you keep that surface completely flat and completely flush, the water is not going to seep into it as much and you're not going to get as much wood rot. You will actually lose more wood in the long term by letting water sit on it and rot versus keeping a nice, fresh, slick surface with some 80 grit sandpaper. Once every 1.5 to 2 years, go ahead and hit it with some 80 grit. Other than that, keep it clean with Starke Teak Clean and your basic boat soap. Well, guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell notification, and also share this video. I will see you guys on my next video. Let's go.